Welcome back to the True Detectives podcast, everybody. I'm Adrian Smith, and I am so ready for today's case.
And I'm Dr. Julia Jones here to help us sort through the evidence and maybe uncover a secret or two.
Absolutely. We're looking at a really interesting investigation today, one that takes us into the world of shadows and how they can actually be used to solve crimes.
Shadows as clues, that sounds pretty unbelievable.
Right. But that's exactly what we're diving into, the story of Detective Ethan Doyle, a detective who got the nickname the Shadow Tracker. He apparently used shadows to crack some really tough cases.
The Shadow Tracker, that sounds like it's right out of a book.
Totally. And we're going to break down his most famous case, the disappearance of a young girl. But before we get into all the details of that, let's talk about shadow tracking itself. Is this even a real thing? Can you really use shadows to solve crimes?
Well, it's not as crazy as it sounds. If you think about it, a shadow is basically a projection of something made by light. The shape and size of the shadow can tell you a lot about whatever made it and how it was positioned compared to the light.
So you're saying that by looking at a shadow, you could figure out things like how tall a suspect was or even which way they were going.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning. People who are really good at shadow analysis can use shadows to figure out what time something happened, the angle of the sun, even the kind of weapon that was used.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So it's not just about spooky vibes. There's real science involved.
Absolutely. It's all about observation light and geometry. When investigators really study how shadows work with their environment, they can find clues they might have missed otherwise.
So how did this Detective Doyle actually use shadow tracking in his cases? What made him different from other detectives?
Well, from what we know, Detective Doyle seemed to have a really deep understanding of light and shadow. He was known for carefully examining crime scenes, especially the ones that happened at night, looking for any little shadow patterns that could give him a clue.
So he was like a Sherlock Holmes, but instead of footprints he was looking for shadow prints.
You could say that.
Yeah.
He really thought that shadows held secrets that could unlock the truth, and a lot of times he was right.
That's incredible. Okay, so let's get to the case that really made Detective Doyle famous, the case of the missing girl.
Okay, so it all started with a mom who was desperate because her daughter had gone missing. There were no witnesses, no signs of a struggle, nothing. The only clue the police had was this weird, distorted shadow that pointed towards an abandoned asylum on the edge of town.
An abandoned asylum. That's creepy.
It is a pretty unsettling scene, isn't it? You know, asylums have always been kind of mysterious and interesting. It's like they hold on to our deepest fears.
Yeah, there's just something about abandoned asylums that screams scary. So what did Detective Doyle do when he got to the asylum? Did he just follow this mysterious shadow?
Pretty much. He was known for trusting his gut, and the shadow seemed to be calling to him. Imagine this. A detective, all alone, walking into this rundown asylum, only guided by the faint outline of a distorted shadow. The moon is out, casting long, eerie fingers of light through the broken windows. It's like something out of a horror movie.
I'm getting chills just imagining it.
Me too. But Doyle wasn't scared. He followed that shadow deeper and deeper into the asylum. And then he found it. A hidden cellar. A secret room hidden underneath the asylum's crumbling foundation.
Okay, now this is getting good. What was in the cellar? Was the missing girl down there?
Unfortunately, no. But what Doyle did find was even more disturbing. There were strange symbols written on the cellar floor, ancient markings that almost looked like they were pulsing with some kind of dark energy.
Ancient symbols. Sounds like we're heading into the world of the occult here.
That's exactly where it started to go. It was obvious to Doyle that this wasn't just a normal disappearance. This cellar had been used for something bad, something like a ritual.
So the missing girl wasn't just a runaway. It sounds like she was involved in something much bigger and much darker.
Exactly. And as Doyle was studying the symbols, he got this feeling of dread. The air felt heavy and still, and he started to feel like he was being watched by something he couldn't see.
So then what happens? This is where things get really creepy, right?
Oh, yeah. As Doyle was standing there in that cellar, surrounded by those weird symbols, he started noticing something strange. His own shadow was acting weird. It was flickering and distorting like it was alive.
You mean his shadow actually came to life? You're kidding me, right?
I know it sounds unbelievable, but that's what the reports say. And it gets even stranger. The shadow actually pulled away from Doyle completely and started to grow, turning into this horrible monster.
Wait, are we talking about a real shadow monster here?
That's exactly what Doyle said. He described it as a creature of pure darkness with jagged edges and these glowing red eyes. It lunged at him, trying to swallow him up in its shadow.
This is like straight out of a horror movie. What did Doyle do? Did he just run away?
He tried to fight back, but regular weapons didn't work against this shadow thing. It was like punching at smoke. Doyle realized he had to find a different way to fight this thing.
So what did he do? How do you even fight a shadow?
Remember those ancient symbols on the cellar floor? Doyle thought they were the key to beating the shadow creature. He'd studied old myths and symbols, and he knew that some symbols could be used to fight off evil or even control supernatural stuff.
So it's like he had to fight magic with magic.
Kind of, yeah. He used what he knew about the symbols to make this protective shield around himself, a circle of light that pushed the shadow creature away.
Wait, so he actually managed to stop this shadow monster by using symbols.
That's what the stories say. It was a tough fight, but Doyle's knowledge of those ancient symbols saved him. He was able to trap the shadow monster in the cellar, tying it to the symbols on the floor.
That's crazy. I mean, I'm trying to imagine this. We're talking about a detective using ancient rituals to fight a shadow monster that came from his own shadow.
It really makes you think about what's real and what's not, doesn't it? This case brings up some interesting questions about shadows themselves and about hidden forces that might be out there just beyond what we can see.
It's like that saying, we're afraid of what we don't understand. But maybe in this case, understanding it is even scarier.
Maybe so. But think about it this way. Doyle's knowledge of these old traditions, which a lot of people would just call superstitions, actually saved his life.
That's a good point. Makes you wonder what other forgotten knowledge might be out there, what secrets we've lost.
Exactly. And what about Doyle? How did this whole experience change him?
Well, from what I've read, he came out of that asylum a different person. He'd seen this darkness hiding in our world and knew that he was now on the front lines against it.
He became kind of a guardian, someone who protects us from unseen forces that could hurt us.
So what happened to the missing girl? Did they ever find her?
Sadly, no. The investigation showed that she was a victim of some kind of dark ritual sacrificed to bring that shadow creature into being. Doyle found proof of other missing people all tied to similar rituals.
So this wasn't a one-time thing. There were others.
It seems like there are people out there messing with forces they don't really understand, and sometimes the results are terrifying.
This whole case is just mind-blowing. It really makes you think, Dr. Jones. What do you make of Detective Doyle and his shadow tracking? Was he a brilliant detective or just crazy?
That's the big question, isn't it? The line between being really smart and being crazy can be blurry. But one thing's for sure, Doyle's case opened a door to a world most of us never see, a world where shadows have secrets and ancient rituals have terrifying power.
And the fact that he actually used those rituals to fight back to protect himself, that's pretty wild.
It reminds us that sometimes the answers to the toughest mysteries are hidden in forgotten knowledge and the wisdom of the people who came before us.
So are you saying there's more to shadows than we think?
Yeah.
That they might actually have some kind of power?
I think it's something to think about. After all, shadows come from light, and light itself is a powerful force. What if shadows aren't just the absence of light, but a reflection of something else, something we can't quite grasp?
Whoa, that's deep. So what happened to Detective Doyle after this? Did he keep using his shadow tracking skills?
He did. He kept working on cases, but his focus changed. He became known as the detective who took on the cases no one else would, the ones that hinted at something beyond the normal. He wasn't just a detective anymore. He was a guardian, a protector against the unseen things that could harm our world.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. You've definitely given me a lot to think about. I don't think I'll ever look at shadows the same way again.
That's what I love about exploring these cases. They make us think about the things we don't know and challenge what we think we know about the world.
Totally. And you know what else is really interesting? Even though Detective Doyle's story sounds like a horror movie, there are actually real ways people use shadow analysis in the real world.
You're right. Forensic scientists use shadow analysis to help them understand crime scenes, to figure out where bullets went, or even to estimate when someone died.
So it's not just a spooky story. It's a real investigation technique.
Exactly. And it's not just for law enforcement either. Architects use shadows to design buildings that get a lot of natural light but don't get too hot. And photographers use shadows to make awesome pictures with dramatic lighting.
Wow. I never thought about how useful shadow analysis could be. So it's a science, an art, and maybe even a little bit of magic.
Maybe. But even with all the science we have, shadows still feel kind of mysterious. They remind us that there are things in this world we'll never fully understand.
Well said.
Yeah.
So that wraps up our investigation into the world of shadow tracking.
It's been a fascinating journey for sure.
It has. And a huge thank you to Dr. Julia Jones for helping us navigate this shadowy case.
It was my pleasure. Always happy to explore the mysteries of the world with you.
And to all of our listeners out there, thanks for joining us. Remember, the truth is out there, usually hiding in the shadows. So keep your eyes open, your minds curious, and maybe leave a nightlight on tonight just to be safe.